The 2024 Las Vegas Grand Prix just wrapped up. George Russell is your race winner, and Max Verstappen is officially your four-time World Drivers' Championship winner. I'm here to go over the race, all the exciting moments. There's quite a few overtakes, a lot of action, so let's get started right away with lap number one. George Russell, the pole sitter. No problem on the very short start to turn one straight. It's really fucking short, probably the shortest on the calendar. So no problem keeping P1 into that first turn. As you can see here, though, Leclerc coming up from P4, right past Gasly, and gets past Sainz shortly thereafter as well. So he moves up from fourth to second right away in the first couple of turns. Lap one, we have Lawson and Magnussen going wheel to wheel. There was a couple times going wheel to wheel in this race. It was pretty crazy, actually. A lot of stuff that you don't really see, especially on a street circuit. A lot of wheel to wheel action for a street circuit, and a lot of overtakes too. So lap one, getting busy right away. Lap four, Max is already making his way up through the field, gets past Gasly finally, and gets up into P4 behind the Ferraris, who were battling each other just as much as they were battling George Russell. Leclerc did have a couple of chances early, and as we see here, him and Russell did go wheel to wheel down into turn one on the beginning of lap five. This was Leclerc's really only opportunity, and you'll see, and again, if you're watching the race, obviously, you'll see that this was the kind of the turning point for Charles Leclerc's race. He did a little bit too much too early on these tires, I guess, and kind of in the cold weather just got them out of that correct window. And as soon as he made these couple of attempts on George Russell here, ultimately ruined his tires and ruined this stint for him and put him behind Carlos Sainz. Also around this time, we see a replay of George Russell have like this plastic bag on his car here. There was so many plastic bags and pieces of trash flying onto the circuit. I could not believe it, and honestly, it's just disgraceful. But anyway, lap 8, like I said, Leclerc's tires were struggling, and Verstappen took advantage. Lap 8 gets ahead of him and into P3. Norris at this point still yet to get behind Gasly. It wouldn't take him long, as I believe he gets by on lap 9. Yeah, end of lap 8, lap 9. Gasly couldn't hold him up too long, buddy, okay? Anyway, Norris gets by Gasly finally up into P5, and he is still a couple seconds behind Leclerc here, over 3 seconds behind Leclerc. And the McLaren just didn't have the pace in this race. They were definitely the third best car on the grid all weekend, and that was pretty apparent. So he couldn't really do much about it, unfortunately, but lap 10, pit stop window open. So they went medium, hard, most of them. Some of them, including Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari, were going to try to do a one stop, but it just did not seem feasible, and it definitely wouldn't have worked if they did try to do it. So lap 10, they pit off the medium onto the hards. And Leclerc and Norris pit lap 10 while these pit stops were happening. Piastri got hit with a 5-second penalty for, I believe, going in the wrong grid spot. They weren't 100% clear on the broadcast what happened. They said it didn't look like he was out of his spot. It didn't look like he missed the spot, like the line in the grid spot, but I think he was actually in the wrong grid position. So he ended up getting a 5-second penalty, which he served at his first pit stop. Lap 10, while the others were pitting, Verstappen, Sainz, and Russell had all stayed out, and Max ended up getting by Sainz on the main straight. And gets by him into P2, which he again gave up, and after he pitted on lap 11 as well. So he pitted the next lap, got past Sainz, but pitted right after. Came out on hards in P7, ahead of both Ferraris. So that crucial for him there. And at this point, Sainz was also ahead of Leclerc. Lap 13. I mean, this main back straight, there was so many times where there was a bunch of cars all bunched up, and it looked like multiple people were going for moves at the same time. And at this point, lap 13, you had guys, the Haas, the Sauber, and the Williams, as you see here, that didn't pit yet. So they were kind of holding up the front runners that had pitted already. So there was a ton of overtaking opportunities. Max, fortunately for him, was his strategy got him ahead of all of them, so he easily made his way through these kind of midfielders and got ahead and into the clear air. Whereas a lot of these guys, the Ferraris especially, had to work their way through a little bit harder and had to waste a little bit of race time. Making their way through these the midfielders. Some of them started on hards, some of them just hadn't pitted yet. I mean, you can see the Haas here. These two guys are on hards, but the Haas is just on mediums and hadn't pitted yet. So different strategy, but kind of screwed up the Ferraris a little bit here. Lap 14, Hamilton pits and comes out behind both Ferraris and Lando. He rages about it on the radio, and just for his team to tell him that if he stayed out any longer, he would have actually dropped 5 spots. So he was raging for no reason. He should have just blamed himself for qualifying poorly. He easily would have been in P2 regardless because their car was the best, and he probably would have won the race if he didn't have such a shit qualifying. So, he likes to blame everybody else. But anyway, he still ended up in P2 anyway. So, yeah, long story short there. So he raged about that, came out, and lap 16 after this, Gasly unfortunately had to retire due to that trash Renault engine failing them once again. And he had a good start to the weekend. I think he qualified, P3. Wasn't doing amazing in the race, but he was holding his own. I mean, he was staying up there, and yeah, has to retire on lap 16 due to an engine failure, and that sucked because then that left Ocon, who didn't do shit. So, anyway, lap 16, Hamilton making his way through the field, gets past Norris and bumps Norris down to P7 while Max is up in P2 at the time. So at this point, the broadcast was already saying pretty much that the Driver Championship is over, so they just need to chill out, you know what I mean? Like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's a long race. But yeah, again, to make a long story short, no flags or crashes or anything this race, which I was personally surprised about, especially with the amount of wheel-to-wheel racing we saw. Don't really understand how there was no incidents, but lap 27, the pit stop window for the two-stop opens up, and radio message comes for Max to box around turn 1. So, like as you can see here, the message comes, and this is him right in the corner here. So, I don't know whether it was a message from the previous lap that maybe they weren't ready for him or what. It seemed like a lot of teams in this race had issues with the pit stops and weren't ready when they made the call. You'll see later. We'll talk about it, but there was multiple pit stop issues, and this might have been one of them. It seemed like a weird time for radio message. Generally, you'll see the message come up towards the end of the lap, and this is in turn 1, so kind of weird there. But um, at the same time, Carlos is begging the Ferrari to box him. He's at this point said a couple laps ago, like, "Hey, can we do a two-stop?" Pretty much, and they said, "Give us 2 laps to get back to you." And now he's practically begging them, and then they tell him swap positions. So I I just don't understand that. So and we'll see. Well, I'll show you why we don't understand that next, because he swaps positions and then tries to come in for the pit. And as you can see here, Hamilton's pitting. Sainz has to shoot right by the pit entry because they weren't ready. They weren't ready. So he told him laps ago that he wants to box. He says box me, and this is towards the middle of the lap, end of the lap on the straight. They say swap positions, and then they're not ready, and he has to go out for another lap, probably losing close to 3 or 4 seconds, having gone down the. He was going to enter the pits and then had to bail out the last second. So terrible from Ferrari there, and somehow Carlos still ended up ahead of Leclerc. So, and we'll talk about that too. Leclerc was not happy about it either. Another pit stop issue around this time too. Ocon went into the pits and pretty much had to serve like a drive-through penalty of his own because his mechanics weren't ready. I think there was one guy standing out in the pits for him, so he had to drive through, go around another lap, and then do his pit stop. So that was a fucking mess too. Lot of pit stop issues. Lap 32, we have Verstappen or Hamilton making his way past Verstappen up into P3. Again, the Mercedes was clearly the best car this weekend, and Max didn't even really try to defend that much because he knew their pace was just way, way better than everybody else on whatever tire it was. Their car just performs really well in the cold for some reason. So uh, Hamilton making his way through very easily, and at this point you can see he's still like 16 seconds behind Leclerc, but I think he's still at the pit maybe at this point. Yeah, Leclerc's still at the pit, so Hamilton at that point had inherited a net P2, and Leclerc pits after Sainz. Sainz pits first, comes out ahead of Leclerc on the warmer tires, and Sainz retains the position ahead of him, and Leclerc did not like that at all. And we'll talk about that after the race. He was bitching about that, about how he was being too nice and this and that. Ferrari fucked over Carlos, and he would have been ahead anyway and was faster the whole race. But he threw a little bit of a tantrum about that. But anyway, lap 36, Yuki gets by Ocon up into P8 and right behind the top team. So he was essentially leading the midfield. Again, he had said earlier in the weekend that he goes out and proves himself and this and that about the promotion, and he does show. I mean, look at Perez this time, dude, down 14th. So I I mean, other than money, I don't know why Perez is sticking around. We have plenty of other options for him. So I just wanted to highlight this because there was plenty of passing in the midfield. We can't get to every single overtake because there was a lot, but Yuki getting important points for the Constructors Championship. As you can see, Lawson at this point also in P10, so that was important. And then, speaking of Perez, he did have a sick moment here. Lap 38, into, I believe this is turn 14, towards the end of that back straight. He goes 3 wide between him, Magnussen, and Lawson, and does end up coming ahead out in front of all three and moves up on the double overtake. So that was pretty sick. That was probably overtake of the day. I'm not gonna lie. Pretty good overtake there, but didn't really matter anyway. Lap 40. Perez gets by Ocon. Ocon was kind of getting just bullied to shit in the second half of this race here. He came out. He started ahead and just kept losing position after position. I don't know whether he did a one stop or not. I have to look at that, but he was getting bullied through the end part of this race here. Lap 41. Verstappen under pressure by both Ferraris at this point, and again, both the Ferraris clearly had a better pace than the Red Bull, and clearly had a less pace than the Mercedes. So again, it was very clear even going through the practice sessions, because it was all similar temperature, similar conditions. It was very clear that the Mercedes was the best, followed by the Ferrari, and followed by Max, and then the McLaren. So that kind of stayed true the entire race here, and we'll see at the end. But lap 42, Carlos is the first one to get past, gets by Max into turn 14. Lap 47, Leclerc finally gets past, and at this point, maybe didn't have enough to get back to Carlos Sainz. 3 laps to go and over a second behind him. So, again, he was not happy about this. But Carlos Sainz ends up taking the last podium position. George Russell is your race winner. He was far and away just good pace the entire time. Had an absolutely clean weekend. The Mercedes were top of pretty much every session, if not every session. I'd have to look back, but very clean weekend from them. Mercedes does perform well in the cold. Probably not going to do very well next week in Qatar, but whatever. They'll take another 1-2. When it rains, it pours for them, dude. Because they get when they do well, it is a 1-2, just like in Belgium again. Even though George got DQ. But anyway, we end up with George Russell, your race winner. Lewis Hamilton comes in second place, back on the podium. Carlos Sainz takes the podium spot from Charles Leclerc in fourth place. Max Verstappen comes in fifth. Lando Norris in sixth behind him, and also gets the fastest lap. But that was not enough. We knew coming into this weekend, if Norris finished behind Verstappen, that was going to be it regardless, and that's exactly what happened. So, seventh place, Oscar Piastri. Tough weekend for him, plus the 5-second penalty. Would have been really close to Norris otherwise, but whatever. Hulkenberg in the top 10 takes 8th place. Yuki Tsunoda in 9th, and Sergio Perez, bro, comes in, fucking slaps his dick on the table, and takes a point, baby. Fucking bitch, dude, honestly. Anyway, he should have just given it to fucking Alonso. Perez in 10th, Alonso 11, Magnussen 12, Zhou up in 13, brother. That was probably the wildest fucking part of the entire weekend. Colapinto in 14, Lance Stroll 15, Liam Lawson 16. Not a great weekend again for him, bro. Not looking too good these last couple of weeks, not going to lie. Ocon down in 17th, pretty typical. Bottas is your bottom back marker, whatever the hell you want to call it, in 18th. And Albon had to retire. Why did he have to retire? Some kind of mechanical issue, I believe. I have to double check that, actually. That's not even in my notes. But Albon and Gasly both retired. Gasly obviously had the engine failure. And I'd actually double check what happened to Albon. But anyway, Max Verstappen ends up your 4-time world champion. It was pretty much secured back in Brazil. And, now was just the icing on the cake. And he finished it off. Not a I almost wish it was a more competitive weekend for the McLaren, just so he could have beat them on just pure skill and race and whatever. But they just didn't really have the pace this weekend. Not that the Red Bull did, because they literally had to trim their fucking wing off to even have a chance to be close enough. And after all that, it still took Max being Max to pull it up into fifth place behind the top four behind the top four cars. Because it was clear Mercedes and Ferrari had the pace, and good for them. Great weekend for Mercedes and Ferrari. Ferrari, I think at this point now, must be closing in on McLaren for the constructors championship. Let's pull that up real quick here. Yeah, it's getting pretty tight now. So Ferrari is only, what is that, 16, 24 points behind now. So that might come down to Abu Dhabi. I mean, listen, the drivers' championship's over, but the constructors' championship is certainly alive. I don't think Red Bull has a chance anymore, obviously at second place, but Mercedes obviously steadfast in fourth. And then Jesus Christ, look at the drop off to the midfield. Big points from Nico Hulkenberg for Haas to get them, into sixth. Alpine drops down to seventh now, and RB gets another couple of points, and they're just right behind Alpine. And with how shit Alpine's been and their reliability and whatnot, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up getting knocked back down to eighth anyway. After that double podium last weekend, it's probably going to end up being for naught, but whatever. But that's your race, man. Pretty crazy Grand Prix. Overall impression of the weekend. They got to figure out the whole dirtiness of the track, and why are we going here when it's going to be so goddamn cold? Why is most other races like within a certain window of temperature and climate, and then this race we're just like, oh yeah, we'll just put it in the worst time. Like it's hot most of the year here. It's in a prime temperature window in Las Vegas most of the year, where it's not going to be too hot or too cold. If they do it a month or two earlier, it'd probably be perfect. I don't understand why we're going in mid November, end of November for for it to be this fucking. I just make that make sense. We're gonna invest all this money to this and then go when it's like the most least optimal track conditions. I don't understand that at all. Um, all the drivers were complaining about the smell of marijuana. I think that's fucking hilarious. But also, if it's that big of an issue and they don't smell it anywhere else, maybe we have to have some more enforcement. Maybe. I don't. I guess it is. It's legal there. I know that you can just walk into a store and buy it if you have an ID, but I don't know that you can just legally smoke it standing on the. I don't know how that works. So maybe crack down on that a little bit so the drivers don't say that they're high. Like Max literally said he's high. I mean he's probably joking, but that's a little bit ridiculous. And there's plastic bags all over the fucking street, man. Guys, have some fucking respect. Stop. They come to the U.S. and there's always these fucking issues, man. Stop being fucking absolute fucking worms, man. How you throwing plastic bags on? What, you think it's funny? You're like, oh, look at my plastic bag on the fucking TV, dude. You're fucking idiots, man. All that sucks. But my overall impression, dude, the racing down the strip is sick, man. That back straight is absolutely. There's nothing else like it on the calendar, and there's certain things at other tracks that there's nothing like that on the calendar. But overall impression, man, it was a good weekend. It was competitive, but there was also teams. It was very clear again, and you can always tell when it's so cut and dry. When it's as you can see, like the top two teams together, all these teammates are together in the top eight, other than fucking Perez licking windows down in 10th. It's very clear on weekends like this which teams have the best pace, and it's kind of interesting sometimes when it works out like that, when they do end up in the exact position that they really should, and then you have the outlier, Max Verstappen, who takes the fucking championship ahead of the shit car. So really good race. Let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna do a whole nother video on Max winning the World Drivers' Championship. There's a lot more to talk about in that, and don't wanna cram it all in this video. Just wanted to do a recap. We'll be back with more F1 content. We'll do a preview obviously for next week. It's not over now. There's still two more races, even though the drivers championship's over. The constructors championship is certainly alive, and we're gonna be here to recap it and preview it all. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Like the video, if you like the video, subscribe. I'll be back with more this week. Peace.